Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm so glad y'all came back. Welcome back to Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy's Social Work Podcast. That's me. I'm Dr. Toy. Thank you for coming back. We're going to have a really good time today because we have a special guest. I cannot wait for you to hear from her. But before we do that, and before we talk about a really important topic, I need to get some things out the way. It's called housekeeping. I don't know why they call it housekeeping, but anyway, we're going to get it out the way. If you want to learn more about the social work program, head up our webpage at www.pit.socialwork. No, that's not it. Why do I keep messing up my own webpage? Let's do it again. www.socialwork.pit.edu. Or email me directly at toyaj@pit.edu. Learn about our bachelor, master's, and PhD program. Also, don't forget, you can email me directly or you can click on the Qualtrics link that will be provided and ask a therapist. We will have an Ask a Therapist segment at the end, so be sure to listen to the end so you can hear the question. I got a question and I'm going to read it on the air. You know you can win a Starbucks gift card. Exactly. I know you want that. So send in your question. Don't be bashful. If you want to be anonymous, you can send in the Qualtrics. If you want everyone to know who you are, you get that Starbucks gift card, email me. I'll hook you up. All right. So first and third Thursday at noon. Almost forgot. Watch new broadcast, first and third Thursday at noon, Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy's Social Work Podcast. Let's get to it. Y'all, I'm rushing to get to this because it's some juicy goodness. And we have a special guest today. I'm going to allow her to talk about herself and her experience, but I need y'all to put your virtual hands together for Dr. Rachel Armstead. The crowd is going wild. They're so happy that you're here. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Tell our Healing Overflow family who you are and what you're doing here today.
Well, greetings to you all. I am Dr. Rachel Armstead, and it is my pleasure to come and speak on one of the areas that are close to my heart, and that's the topic of child welfare. I am a social worker at heart. I've been in the field of social work for the past 26 years. So ever since I got out of college, I decided to pursue and I started learning about families and how to help them and how they grow and how they function. And I just wanted to learn more. So I actually graduated from the University of Pittsburgh. I got a master's in social work from Pitt. I am a Pitt alumni, proud of it. And most recently, I actually went back to even further my education. I spent 20 years in the field of child welfare. And during that course of time, I've come across a number of topics relating to families and the struggles with abuse and neglect and the number of issues that intersect that, such as poverty, which is the area that I decided to focus my doctoral research on. So I finished up my doctoral research and my focus was on culturally competent practices in the field of child welfare, particularly with those who live in the culture of poverty. So it was an exciting journey, learned a lot, and I'm just really glad to be here.
We're glad you're here. I am particularly glad you're here. I'm wondering, so you talked about you focused on poverty. We're used to hearing disparities of race, diversity, cultural background, and the disparities, especially in the child welfare sector. What made you focus on poverty and not race and, cultural disparities and things like that? Why'd you focus on poverty?
Well, in my years of experience, particularly being in the field of social work and working with families directly, going into the homes I started off the first 15 years going into homes. And where I did work with a lot of African American families, the majority of my clients actually were Caucasian families. And I noticed that regardless of their race, because of their economic status, they were being treated differently. they lacked resources, and they didn't have the connections, and so some of them faced unfair treatment because they weren't quite as educated as others. They didn't have the clothing like others. They didn't have the ability to access different resources, and so I saw that as a factor, and it was blatant mistreatment. And I wanted to study it more to see what other spheres it goes across, and what other areas, and what this looks like, and what does the research say.
Wow. Okay, this is particularly interesting to me. I know y'all are pulling up some chairs because it's interesting to you. So I want to dig a little bit more into this, because my knowledge of poverty is what we learned in social work economics class, which was a lot. But to me, poverty is poverty almost. And I know y'all gasp, those that know more. But I think about, when you're below the poverty level, when you're trying to make ends meet, like my mom used to say, probably still says, that's poverty. And so when you're struggling financially, you're below that poverty line, that's poverty. Are there different levels of poverty or different types of poverty? Can you help explain that a little bit more to us?
Absolutely. And by definition, there are different types of poverty. So the first type of poverty is absolute poverty. And this is the poverty that you find in third world countries. You see their medium income, they do not earn $5,000 for a whole year. There is just absolute, there's
Wow.
not even clean water. So they're starting from ground zero, trying to get clean water, trying to find something to eat, making a makeshift shelter, living in a home that can deteriorate at any moment. Then there is relative poverty. So that brings us back over into the United States of America. In the third world countries, there's absolute poverty, but here we have it where it's relative. It can be situational or generational. My grandmother was low income. My mother was low income, very little education, had children at a young age. The children are low income, and now the great-grandchildren are growing up in poverty. And so that generational poverty is just passed down. There's limited resources, and that becomes their way of life. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with living in poverty or anything wrong with those people who are in poverty. That's just the way their socioeconomic status is. They have embraced that, and they make the best of it. But then there's situational poverty, such as someone who is a victim of domestic violence in a home where you have a husband who has a great job, you have your 3 children, and you are a homemaker, so you stay at home, or you have perhaps a minimum wage job, slightly above minimum wage. But if there's domestic violence and that husband who's the main breadwinner gets violent and you leave the home, you also step away from that financial support, which now shifts you into that bracket of poverty.
Right. So these are things that I've been aware of through my career and didn't realize that they're actually defined as different types of poverty. This is really interesting. Are there any other types?
Well, those are the 2 basic types. Either it's going to be generational or it's going to be situational, defined by your circumstances. Such as, if you look at, and in studying about poverty, it was interesting to note, I had to study a little bit about homelessness. And a lot of them fall under situational poverty circumstances. It wasn't that they were always on the street, wasn't that they didn't come from a loving home or even a middle income home, or should I say upper middle class home. But because of situations and circumstances, sometimes it could be because of addiction, because of mental health issues, because you weren't able to maintain employment. And for many Americans out there, we call them the blue collar workers, some of them are just, 1 paycheck away from being in poverty. If they lose that job, then the family has nothing, and they fall into that circumstance.
Absolutely. That's what we see in a lot of our work as social workers, as therapists, as caseworkers. Those that do the home visit. Now, I started off doing home visits too. I'm gonna tell y'all, there is no lesson like a home visit. You really get to know your clients and get to understand how they live. But I'm wondering, because through my career, through my colleagues' career, we run into folks that have grown up different than we have. Even though we have our brown skin, I feel like that is an asset, especially working with people of color. However, we have our white friends, we have our majority population and race folks that get it. And they can do this work, and they do it efficient. They do it wonderfully. So I'm wondering, what kind of barriers did you have going in to folks' home, doing the type of work that you do, and even talk about, the type of work that, the type of people you work with, but also what you do now. What kind of barriers did you encounter? Even though you got the brown skin, I imagine, like me, that wasn't a pass. You didn't just like show your brown arm in the peephole and then get into the house. What type of barriers did you encounter with folks that, struggle economically?
Well, it's interesting. There were some who, because of the color of my skin, it was a barrier in and of itself.
Ah.
How can you come into my home? You don't know anything about me. And if race was an issue for them, combating that issue of racism while you're trying to help someone and provide resources that they need, it makes your job that much more complex.
Sure.
And so you have to literally, you're thinking on your feet, because as a child welfare worker, there's abuse and neglect allegations. I'm mandated by the state to work with the family, work in that home. I have to see that child. I have to see that young child under the age of 5 at least once a week. So rejection is not an option. And so finding a way to make common ground, to connect with them. And the biggest way I found to do that was connecting them to resources. And sometimes I had to start with resources for the children, because oftentimes the parents were just closed off, not really receptive. But I found that as I provided things that the children needed and was able to bring out things that the children enjoyed, it softened the heart of the parent, and we were able to have a more positive relationship, a working relationship, so that I can then encourage the parents to take and partake in necessary services to provide.
I like
for the
it.
Family.
You did a little backdoor move.
Absolutely.
I can dig it. I like it a lot. So, okay, I'm looking at and listening and remember what you said about poverty in particular. It sounds like, we have a course in the social work bachelor program and the master's program called Diverse Populations. And with diverse populations, we talk about intersecting identities. And so what makes up Dr. Toya, what makes up Dr. Armstead, all of these intersecting identities. I noticed even through some of my trauma work that, if I didn't have a loved one or, a child that died by homicide, then sometimes the parents would say, you don't understand, and just like you talked about, the person say, well, how do you know what I'm going through? You're of a different race. It sounds like to me that you categorize poverty as diversity, as a culture, as one of the diverse identities. And so I want to just explore that a little bit, because it sounds like to me poverty is a culture, and you approach it that way. Even though you might not have grown up, in poverty, you may have. We don't know. We didn't dig into Dr. Rachel's background like that. But the clients don't know that either. And so what did you do? First of all, do you categorize poverty as culture? And through categorizing poverty, if you do as culture, how do you then move in that realm of saying poverty is a culture and now I move this way? Like, talk about that a little bit. This is really interesting to me.
And so to answer your question, yes, poverty is a culture. And I can take a step back, being transparent. Yes, I grew up in the culture of poverty with a single mother having 5 young children, 4 which were back to back to back to back. It was But because it was a loving home, we didn't think of it as, we knew we didn't have much, but we accepted it and we were able to, grow and go with it. But when you think about the culture of poverty, surprisingly in my research, and it started during the pandemic, so in 2020, I'm doing all my research here online, I was finding that poverty was discussed more over in Europe than in the United States in terms of current research. It was surprising, and I thought about it from the standpoint, because over in England, there is royalty.
Right.
There are social classes. And social class and social status has a whole different meaning when you had the queen. Now you have the king. And so it's totally different from the United States. There's no queen or king over here. There's no royalty unless someone comes over from another country to visit. We kind of recognize them. And really, if they have money, we really recognize them.
Sure.
And so social class, though, in other countries where they have different types of government, it means a whole different thing. So regardless of your race, if your social status is low, if your dad was a beggar, if your mom only worked in the farm, then you were considered less than. And so looking at it and studying that, how they studied it in Europe and in the countries outside of the United States, I thought about it over in the United States in the culture of poverty. Your race doesn't matter so much when it comes down to your income. And so coming from southwestern Pennsylvania, small little town where the steel mill was the primary breadwinner, and that was the primary source of employment, when it shut down, a lot of people lost their jobs. But there was a sense of community and camaraderie because the whole community was suffering. But at the same time, the whole community began to develop a close bond and relationship. And I provide. When you lack, I give. And when I lack, you give to me. And so there was a sharing. And so it wasn't so much of a deficit as it was just, okay, this is our circumstance. So we learn from it and we continue to move on.
We could go on and on about this. This is some good stuff. This is some gold nuggets, y'all. I don't know if you heard them clink and clang on the floor. But this is some good stuff. I'm going to stick with the culture and the poverty, but we could do a whole show just talking about poverty, literally. I love the way that you categorize poverty as culture, because then you begin to look at people through a different lens, through the social work lens, but you're looking at their poverty not in a deficit type of view, but you're looking at them as it's the culture. There's nothing wrong that you have come up in poverty and that you are still in poverty as generational poverty. There's nothing wrong that is your life and that's what's happened. And I think that's so important for the work that you do and for the work that we do, because now we're not looking at, oh, poor you. You're in a deficit, but we're looking at you and saying, what are your assets? What are your strengths? And I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about this. I'm gonna tell you what I'm skeptical about. Y'all know how I am. I'm skeptical about teaching this. This seems to be your aha revelation. And I'm skeptical about going to a cultural awareness, cultural competence. We've heard this so much. We strive to be aware and competent. I don't know, what words we use because we change, and say we should use competent and we should use this. But we should have knowledge and we should practice and move with cultural awareness and competence. But I'm going to be transparent with y'all. I've been to 1,001 trainings, and I love trainings. Cognitively, it's stimulating, intellectually, I feel like I'm equipped. However, I know that when I'm in a training, no matter what the content is, I put my big bounder away and I continue to go back to my old habits. And I know that we all do that. Do you think cultural competence, cultural awareness trainings are effective? That's one. And two, how can we embed these practices? Can we change, from our values and our norms and what we're used to growing up with? I'm stacking the questions, so I'm going to ask one at a time, because all the questions was into my head. Do you think the trainings are effective? I'll let you answer that first.
Yes.
Those are my pearls I grabbed. What? All right, how so?
Well, let me qualify that by stating that I think training can be effective. So to present information about a specific culture is, unless you're from that culture, it's almost an insult to that culture. So if you and I would sit down and we would develop a training for Asian Americans, it just wouldn't work. We're not Asian. We don't know their experience. We don't know what goes on in a daily life. We don't understand family culture, the background, the history, and so we would do a disservice. But too often we have trainings where we are doing just that. We read 3 books, 5 articles, we come up with a summary, our bullet points, our great PowerPoint, and we have a training. One of the things that I've learned in my research is that, and it was interesting because part of the research was cultural competence, and I studied how the impact of education and the trainings that they're providing, even on the collegiate level, the bachelor's level and the master's level. And what it came to was that only the trainings and the experiences and the classwork that involved and allowed the students, insisted that the students engage in that culture, produced positive results, produced a level of knowledge, a greater level of knowledge and awareness. And so if there's no engaging of that culture, talk about it, read about it, all that you want. There's no change in your own personal bias unless there's an engagement, and that unless there's hand to hand, you go in and mesh yourself in that culture temporarily to learn. And even there, cultural competence is an ongoing thing. You never get competent because you go to 5 trainings and you get
arrive.
3 certificates. Not
I'm now culturally competent. Like, no such thing.
Not at all.
Wow. That's so good. That's so good. The training, so the knowledge, then the hands-on training, moving within that culture.
Right.
And interacting with that culture, then you're learning in all these different ways.
Absolutely.
Yes. That's imperative. So I'm wondering too, though, how do I overcome what I've been taught for so long? I've been taught this, I've been taught to believe that. We have belief systems and values and upbringings, and we have to override that system, especially when it's biased, especially when it's oppressive. And I know trainings alone, and thank you for imparting that wisdom, that we have to get into the crowd. We have to get into the population. We have to befriend. We have to get to know folks, and we can't say, well, all of this population is like that because I know one person from population. We can't do that. Part of our training needs to be active. How do we override what we've been learning for so long? Because that training, life training, is active, it's hands-on, it's messaging, it's constant messaging daily, and I'm walking in that. This is what I believe about people that live in poverty. This is what I've grown up to believe, and most of the time, it's not positive. It's not asset framing. It's always deficit framing. So how can we override, that script and that chip that's been placed in our head?
We absolutely can. And that was part of the focus, and a large majority of the focus for my research was in the field of child welfare, how can we get workers to become more culturally competent? Part of that competence is sensitive to those living in the culture of poverty. The majority of clients involved in the child welfare system are at or below the poverty level. But in looking at it factually and looking at the research, poverty does not lead to child maltreatment, and those who maltreat their kids don't end up in poverty. When it comes to abuse and neglect, rich people abuse and neglect kids, Poor people abuse and neglect kids. Middle class people abuse and neglect kids. And so it's across the board. It's just that the lower class don't have the resources. They can't get the quick lawyer. They can't escape some things. They can't hide some things. They can't go on vacation for 2 weeks while the child's black eye bruise heals. And so oftentimes the children that are coming from low income families, they are more visible to mandated reporters. And so we see an influx of those who are low income, whereas those who are in upper middle class and in the higher economic status, then they don't have as much visible contact, or they have resources and parents have contacts and connections. And so looking at it, if the child welfare workers, and believe it or not, the majority that I have seen, and I was watching this before I started my research, which piqued my interest, was that you have those who grew up in middle income families, and they're going out to these families like they're so poor, they waste their money, and they don't spend their food stamps properly. They don't know how to shop, and they're just buying junk for their kids, not realizing that the learning and how they were brought up is different. Their culture is different. And I found that one of the small aspects, I'll give you this nugget just for free, is that when it comes to low income, the parents, they have a heart for their children. And because they can't take them on a vacation, they can't get them a new car for their 16th birthday. You know what? When at the beginning of the month, when we get our government benefits, I'm going to let you get 5 snacks that you want. And so you see this, you go into a home, you see, wow, all these snacks here, you're wasting your money. You should have fruits and vegetables and organic stuff and healthy food. Not realizing and recognizing you don't know the culture, but you judge from your own personal biases. And so in studying how can we change the mindset of the child welfare workers going into the home, one of the answers was it has to be done through training, and it has to be ongoing training. Cultural competence, to the point that part of the definition of it is becoming aware of your own personal biases. And as the older, more seasoned caseworkers and managers and supervisors encounter the new caseworkers coming in, checking them on their personal bias. When you hear them talk, that home was filthy, the clients, they smelled, and they don't have any money, and they just waste their... Hold up. When it comes to going in someone else's home, we may be the professional, but we're not the expert of their culture.
Oh, cling, cling. That was nuggets again. Sorry. I'm dropping them. No, you're dropping them. So the first, I'm hearing tips. Y'all know I like to give Dr. Toy tips. These are some Dr. Rach tips. So be aware of your own cultural bias. Boom. 1. What else you got? Come on. I know you got pockets full of gold nuggets. What other tips?
The other thing is, take time to learn about the culture. And sometimes you have to, yes, do some reading, but sometimes, okay, let's make it modern day. Google, go on YouTube. What are they? They said they're from Puerto Rico. Okay, I got a family from Puerto Rico. Foods in Puerto Rico. Famous places, historians. Learn about the culture. Take time to learn. Particularly, I did ongoing protective care work with families for 10 years. The first 10 years, that was my first aspect of child welfare. And there were some families I worked with them for 3 years. And for 3 years, if I had a family that I did not know about their culture after 3 years, shame on me as the caseworker.
Oh, so learn about the culture, get in relationship with folks from that culture, research, and not just, I'm hearing you say, not just book research, not just YouTube. YouTube is very effective in learning and having videos from all over the world, but get to know the family. You should not be working with somebody for 3 years and not knowing them. We have other folks from other disciplines, other majors, other career backgrounds. These are some nuggets and some tips for you all too, because we can be biased and discriminating, and we can be oppressive in just the way that we think and talk about someone behind our back, to our colleagues. And so those that are in different professions like nursing and any helping professions really can utilize this information. So becoming aware of your own bias, getting to know and become more familiar with the culture, especially if you're not familiar with it. It's not just dichotomous race and culture, it's not just black person or a white person. There's so many different cultural backgrounds. I don't want to limit you. Do you have any more nuggets and tips that we can continue to look through our multicultural lens and do this thing right?
Absolutely. I think the other thing is to recognize that all people are not alike. And I think that comes down to the difference between equity and equality. Some people need more support. And so I think of it in terms of a natural school system. In a low-income area, the school system may not have brand new textbooks. They may not have a swim team, a golf team, or all those other things. They may limit it to 2 or 3. But the fact is, and so that school would need more funding versus a school that has resources. It's from, there's a lot of upper middle class people that send their children to that school. They have funding. They're able to support and offer extracurricular activities on a just a vast level. The same is true for families, particularly I found in child welfare. And believe it or not, the model that I used for my research came from a nursing model. And just as you stated, all helping professions, it comes down to the same thing in dealing with people. When you encounter another person, sometimes we have the tendency to judge by what we see, judge by how a person talks, their accent, their look. All cultures are not created equal. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier at the start of it, 2 of us, we are both African American females. One of us has been married for the past 15 years.
20 years.
One of us has been raising 2 children for the past 9 years. Our experience over the past 10 years is different, even though we both have a degree, bachelor's, we both have a master's, we both have a doctorate. But your experience and how you run your household is different from my experience. Yes. So just because I go and learn about African American females, I would be foolish to think that I could treat you the same way as if I went into someone's home who was like me. So I don't want you to think that once you go up and read about African American females, then you have it down packed. But when you go into the home, ask questions. That's the best advice, and we give that to our new workers. Ask questions, engage. How do you, what is that? Please tell me more. Yes. And allow them to give their answers without being judged.
You said something so important. Well, you said a whole lot of important things in there. The judging part. We cannot compare our clients. We cannot compare the people we work with in the community. We cannot compare the folks that we service and help to ourselves. They're not the same. Even if you're a brown face and I'm a brown face, we have a whole nother background. Even if I'm a cisgendered female, you're a cisgendered female. No, it doesn't mean that we are the same. And so I can't judge. I love your story about the snacks. That's an eye-opener, y'all. Because if I can't afford to take you to Disney World, I can get you some hot Cheetos and some Oreos and a Mountain Dew. Those are all the teenage snacks. I do believe I got it.
Right.
Right? I can afford that. And that's a treat. That's your Disneyland in a bag. That makes sense. And so if I'm looking at a family and not judging them, we judge when we compare people to ourselves and our upbringing. That's right. I work with incarcerated population and ex-offenders quite a bit. And a lot of times people will say, well, why didn't they just do that? Well, they didn't have to resort to selling drugs. They should have did this. They should have done that. I would have done this. Well, we have different resources. I know I'm not condoning selling drugs, but I am saying we have to look through different, we both wear glasses today. We have to look through different lenses when we're working with people. Each person is a different person and they have a story. And it's our business to find out what that story is, right, and be able to accommodate and relate to them the best that we can. I am so full, y'all. My cup has run over. It's drenching. I mean, the overflow is all over the place. It's all over the floor. Water, nothing else. But it's all over. I thank you so much for being here. Will you stick around for the Ask a
Thank
Therapist segment?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we are going to jump to the Ask a Therapist segment, and then we will properly say goodbye to our guest, Dr. Rachel Armstead, here on Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you'll come back because this was too much fun for me. I don't know about y'all. Oh no, of course you have fun. So, okay. Ask a Therapist segment. I have a question, y'all. I have a question. Thank you for sending in your question. Thank you for watching the podcast. I appreciate all of the support. Y'all have been wonderful. I've been hearing so many, good things and getting emails. So thank y'all so much. Here's our question. This question, they use the Qualtrics link and they want to remain anonymous. So I can't give the Starbucks gift card, but if you still want it and you send in your name, you can come and pick it up, or you can just come pick it up at the School of Social Work, 21st floor. Okay, here we go. Hello, Dr. Toy. I am a second-year student at Pitt. I come from a pretty background. I'm going to say tough, but that's not what they said. A pretty tough background. That is why I want to help other people. Well, let me get to my question. I was sitting in class and the topic of domestic violence really got to me. Other students were telling their stories of growing up and their relationships too. It really bothered me, so much to the point that I ran out of the classroom in tears. I'm so sorry. I feel so embarrassed. I really don't want to go back there. So what I'm asking is, how do I show my face in my class again? And how do I get through triggers so this stuff doesn't bother me anymore and I can help other people? Sign, College Girl in Distress. Well, thank you for your creative signature, first of all, College Girl in Distress. My first reaction is I want to say, you shouldn't be embarrassed, but that's not what I'm going to say, because that is how you feel, and I'm going to validate that. Feeling embarrassed for running out and crying, that's understandable. Let me back up, though. You said you had a pretty tough background. Having a tough background lays some pretty toiled soil. And when that soil is down there and it's ripe for growing, it will grow some triggers, okay? And because you've been through the tough background, not by any fault of your own, and I'm going to guess, you didn't say it in your question, but I'm going to guess that you've had some exposure to intimate partner violence or domestic violence in some way, shape, or form. Wouldn't you assume that just from the question?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to assume that. And when your peers talk about domestic violence or violence, it's triggering some of your memory. Let me reassure you that is a normal reaction. It's completely and totally normal for you to get upset, for your brain to say, uh-oh, there's danger. So we talked about this on Healing Overflow. We talked about the brain being activated and reactivated when you've gone through some tough stuff in your life. That memory is laid down in your brain, in your hippocampus, and it pops up whenever it's tapped on the shoulder. You know, it's reminded, hey, you've been through this traumatic event or similar to it. And so your brain said, well, I'll let the viewers fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, y'all. What did College Girl in Distress automatically do? What did her brain say? That's right. Flight. Get on out of there. This is a dangerous situation. When it wasn't, it was perceived. But, you know, that reactive brain and that automatic part of the brain doesn't know that it's not really a dangerous situation. And perhaps back then, when you were in the situations that you were in that were really tough for you, maybe you didn't have a way of escape. Or even maybe you did physically escape, and that's how you remain safe. Okay? Keep that in mind. So, you had a flight response. I'm going to encourage you that you're in a good place because you're aware of your trigger. it is really difficult to identify your trigger, especially when you're triggered. You're like, what am I doing? I just feel like I'm weird. That's where the embarrassment comes from. I feel like I overreacted, or I reacted in a way that I shouldn't have. I always kick should and could out of my vocabulary and with my clients as well. You should have done exactly what your brain and your body told you to do, because you were in that situation before, and that's the way you kept your body and your brain and everything safe. So being aware that, okay, I'm running out of the classroom and it wasn't a dangerous situation, that is actually being in a really good place, because now you're in a great place of healing. You have opened up the door of being aware that I want to do something about this. Yes, you can still help people, and you still can get help for yourself. I think it's very healthy to go to therapy. I mean, you're talking to a therapist, so I'm a little biased, but it's very healthy. I think therapists should have therapists. They should have gone to therapy. That's the only time I'm going to use should. It's very healing forward and very helpful. And I would recommend, and this is, of course, an opinion and not a professional therapist type of interaction, disclosure and all that. I would suggest that you get into therapy. You're right and ready. You're aware. And so getting with someone that is a trauma specialist, someone that can help you work through what you've been through. The Counseling Center at the University of Pittsburgh is wonderful. And there are absolutely fantastic therapists all over the city, and all over the community. And so if you have private insurance, call them up, ask what their specialty is, and if they specialize in trauma, that's a person you want to try. Now, therapists are not one size fits all. If you don't like the person, try them a couple times and then say, I don't know if this is working out. This is why. And then if it's still not working out, you can move on to another one. Therapists, we know that happens, and it's okay. It's okay. So I wish you all the best, college girl in distress. You're going to be okay. And you continue to heal, because as you heal, it overflows onto the people around you. I know that that'll happen for you, and I wish you the best. Thank you for your question. All right. I think we've come to the end of the segment. I've had a ball. I've had such a good time. Any parting words, any last tidbits? I don't want to leave any stone unturned. Anything that you want to say to the Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy viewing audience?
It's been a great experience. If I could leave any nugget of advice, that would be whatever culture you engage in, whoever you are helping, you encounter, try to meet them where they're at. It's okay. We all are different, but meeting one another where we're at, those who are called to help in the helping field and human services, as we continue to meet the clients where they're at, then we can be most impactful and help them, and then the helping can just be paid forward.
Oh, that's
Thanks
wonderful.
for having me.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Armstead. We're going to call her Dr. Ray, because that's just what I feel. You know what I mean? I hope that's okay.
That's okay.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for just spilling all the gold nuggets, giving us so much that we can, go forward and we can move forward in. Thank you so much. Hey, Healing Overflow family, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in every first and third Thursday at noon. Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy's Social Work Podcast. We'll be here. We'll be here waiting for you. So I hope you'll pull up a chair and come join us. Also, of course, always you can email me at toyaj@pitt.edu. Or if you want to know more about the School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh, hit up our website at www.socialwork.pitt.edu. Always, you can scan the QR code. Follow me on all the social media sites so you can be in the know. You'll know what show is coming up, who my guests will be, all of that good stuff. So just follow me on all of that social media stuff that my kids told me to get. So it's been wonderful. Thank you for joining us. And I'll see you next time. Keep healing so the healing overflow on everyone around you. Thank you so much. Bye. Oh, wait, before you go, I have a little something for you. So, y'all know that Dr. Rachel Armstead, Dr. Ray, we're now calling her, is an alumni of the MSW program, it's the School of Social Work. So, I have a whole bag full of goodies. See, the sticker says Pitt Alumni.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's what we do. We give out gifts over here. I just think it's such an inspiration, to come from an MSW student to now what is your title?
Assistant Administrator of Beaver County Children and Youth Services.
I just wanted her to say it. I'm so impressed with that. And you've done so much with the MSW degree, and you've earned this bag of free stuff. So it's a lot of social work swag. We have a t-shirt, we have candy, we have a mug and pen and all the School of Social Work goodies stuffed in that little bag.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And thank you again for being our Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy Social Work Podcast guest. Thank y'all for watching, and we'll see you next time.